70% of the calories consumed in the United States come from products designed in a laboratory. Food scientists engineer these substances with a specific biological mandate: ensure the consumer cannot stop eating. Inside roughly 2 billion people, these engineered formulas are dismantling biological systems that took millions of years to evolve. Gut linings are eroding, and dopamine receptors are burning out from years of overstimulation. This destruction manifests as an invisible inflammation. It spreads through vital organs like a slow fire in a building with no alarm, operating without triggering a single physiological warning. While the damage is severe, the body is waiting for a single signal to begin repairing itself. That signal is the removal of the specific foods causing the destruction. Scientists use the term ultra-processed foods, or UPFs, to describe a specific category of industrial formulations. These are substances extracted from foods or derived from food constituents, leaving almost no intact whole food in the final product. The ingredients list for these items features compounds never found in a home kitchen. High fructose corn syrup, hydrogenated vegetable oils, and artificial emulsifiers are engineered specifically to hijack the human sense of taste. This chart reflects data from a British medical journal study of over 100,000 adults. It shows that individuals consuming the highest proportion of UPFs saw a 23% increase in serious cardiovascular events compared to those eating the least. Beyond heart disease, high UPF diets correlate with rising rates of type 2 diabetes, clinical depression, and certain forms of cancer. The World Health Organization now identifies these dietary patterns as a leading contributor to the global burden of preventable chronic disease. The biological destruction begins deep within the digestive tract, home to approximately 38 trillion microorganisms. This internal ecosystem, the gut microbiome, has more cells than the rest of the body combined. This schematic represents the gut-brain axis, where the microbiome produces neurotransmitters and regulates the immune system. Whole foods fuel beneficial bacteria that reinforce the intestinal wall. Ultra-processed foods introduce artificial emulsifiers that degrade this layer, allowing harmful bacteria direct contact with the gut lining. This diet essentially evicts the body's internal maintenance crew. Without the mucosal shield, the body's most critical biological barrier is left defenseless against intrusion. When harmful bacteria penetrate the intestinal wall, the immune system responds to the invasion with its only available weapon: inflammation. This chronic low-grade systemic inflammation lacks the visible swelling or pain of an acute injury. It operates in total silence for years or even decades. Inflammatory molecules called cytokines pour into the bloodstream. From there, they travel to the liver, the joints, and the arteries, causing damage that remains unnoticed until a metabolic crisis occurs. Doctors use a blood marker called C-reactive protein, or CRP, to measure this hidden fire. Individuals with the highest UPF intake consistently show significantly elevated CRP levels. Elevated CRP is one of the strongest independent predictors of future heart disease and metabolic breakdown, often signaling the damage long before physical symptoms appear. The moment the intake of laboratory-designed food stops, the body ceases the damage cycle. This pause allows the biological systems to initiate repair processes they have been holding in reserve. While the damage began in the gut, the first measurable signs of this repair actually occur within the brain's neurochemistry. The first 72 hours without ultra-processed foods are often marked by intense disorientation and physical discomfort. This sensation is the physical experience of dopamine pathways attempting to recalibrate. After years of artificial overstimulation, the brain is adjusting its baseline sensitivity. Simultaneously, gut bacteria colonies shift rapidly. These microbes begin the work of rebuilding the physical structures of the intestinal wall. The intense difficulty of the first 2 weeks reflects the speed of this transition. One critical biological structure in the gut completely rebuilds itself every 10 to 14 days, a rapid physical overhaul that most people mistake for dietary failure. Curious, engaging. Think about the rush you feel when you smell a fresh pizza, right in that split second before you take the first bite. Your brain is flooded with dopamine. We usually call dopamine the pleasure chemical, but that gets the biology backward. Dopamine is the anticipation chemical. It does not reward an event, it rewards your brain's prediction that pleasure is coming. This bar chart shows exactly how ultra-processed foods exploit that predictive system. A fresh apple raises your dopamine levels by a modest, natural amount. A highly processed snack, loaded with artificial taste enhancers, spikes that same data completely off the charts. Food scientists have spent decades engineering products that trigger unnaturally large dopamine surges. They create a sensory expectation that whole foods physically cannot match. Over time, these products turn a biological system built for survival into a chemical trap. When your brain is hit with overwhelming signals, it adapts. Think of it like living next to a loud train track. At first, every passing train is deafening, but after a few months, your brain turns down the volume. You stop noticing the noise. The exact same process happens with dopamine. To survive the daily volume of ultra-processed food signals, your brain physically reduces the number of receptors available to receive them. The result of those disappearing receptors is that normal, everyday pleasures begin to feel flat. A home-cooked meal tastes bland. You need massive stimulation to feel the baseline satisfaction you once reached effortlessly. This line graph maps out what happens when you cut off that stimulation. Within 6 to 12 hours of your last ultra-processed meal, the erratic, rapid glucose spikes you've been riding suddenly plunge. Your blood sugar stabilizes into a flat, low baseline. Your body doesn't know what to do with this sudden stability. You feel deeply tired, irritable. Your concentration fractures, and a dull headache settles right behind your eyes. Every cell in your brain is demanding the fast, engineered fuel it grew accustomed to receiving on demand. These physical symptoms mark the onset of acute chemical withdrawal. If we shrink down to a cellular scale and enter the midbrain, we arrive at a small cluster of neurons called the ventral tegmental area. Normally, this specific region acts as your primary dopamine factory. The mere thought of a favorite snack or the crinkle of a wrapper causes these neurons to fire rapidly. But right now, at the 12-hour mark without processed foods, the incoming orders have stopped. The factory is technically running, but the signals have dropped to an absolute whisper. This neural pathway map tracks the connection moving forward into the nucleus accumbens, the brain's main reward center. Day after day, year after year, it is used to receiving a flood of chemicals. Now, that flow has slowed to a triple. The receptors at the end of this pathway have been suppressed for months. They are completely offline and physically unready to process these new, normal levels of dopamine. This sudden starvation of chemical flow creates an internal crisis. Unable to process the low signal, the reward center initiates an immediate emergency response. The reward center fires an urgent chemical message upward into the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for decision-making. The message demands immediate action. Fix it. Eat. This chemical imbalance generates a false emergency that registers to the conscious brain as a physiological need for survival. The craving carries the weight of a biological necessity rather than a simple preference. Push past that feeling and you hit a turning point around the 48-hour mark. The brain begins to recognize that no actual starvation or physical danger has materialized. The prefrontal cortex starts actively overriding the distress signals bubbling up from the lower reward center. The physical markers of this shift are clear. Your blood sugar line stops spiking and crashing. Your baseline energy, though perhaps lower than normal, finally stops fluctuating. Getting through this 48-hour window does not require immense moral willpower. It simply requires waiting out a chemically induced false alarm. While your brain is recalibrating, a quieter event is unfolding roughly 23 feet below, inside your gut ecosystem. Rewind slightly to the 24 to 48-hour window. A massive bacterial shift is happening at the exact same time as your neurological withdrawal. The bacterial species that thrive on refined sugars and artificial additives are rapidly losing their primary food supply. Their growth rate slows to a crawl. As you introduce whole foods rich in fiber and resistant starch, dormant species of beneficial bacteria wake up and begin to multiply, reclaiming that abandoned territory. A 2019 Cell study mapped this shift. On this 72-hour comparative area chart, you can see the population of the additive-dependent bacteria sharply declining, mirrored perfectly by the steep incline of the new whole food-dependent group. This data proves that major dietary changes do not take months to alter the microbiome. The internal ecosystem restructures itself in a matter of hours. These newly multiplying bacteria have a vital secondary function. They produce a short-chain fatty acid called butyrate. Butyrate serves as both the primary energy source and the raw construction material for the specific cells lining your colon. This cross-section diagram shows exactly how those building blocks are used. The bacteria deposit the butyrate to rapidly patch and rebuild the critical mucus barrier that ultra-processed emulsifiers steadily wear away. By the time you hit the strict 72-hour mark, your external reality might still feel challenging. Your physical energy can be unpredictable, and cravings will occasionally flare up. Beneath the surface, your neurochemistry and gut ecosystem are undergoing a physical restoration. Receptors are beginning to reset, and the protective gut lining is actively thickening. These combined repairs create the biological foundation for a major metabolic shift. By removing gut inflammation and stabilizing the brain's reward center, the body is now prepared to transition into a more efficient state of processing energy. By day 7, the internal changes become a physical sensation you can actually feel. The constant bombardment of fast-absorbing sugars has finally stopped. Normally, your pancreas responds to a meal by releasing insulin. This hormone works like a shuttle, moving glucose out of your bloodstream and into your cells to be used for energy. But when you eat refined sugars all day, your pancreas is forced into constant overtime. Eventually, your cells begin to ignore the insulin signal entirely, a state called insulin resistance. It currently affects roughly 1 in 3 adults in the United States. Within a week of removing those dietary drivers, fasting blood glucose levels typically begin to trend downward. Your energy stabilizes after you eat, and that familiar afternoon crash starts to weaken. This process shows that insulin resistance is not a permanent sentence. Your body is capable of rapidly relearning how to burn fuel at a steady, sustainable pace once the overload is removed. As your blood sugar stabilizes, the focus shifts to your liver. Weighing roughly 1.4 kilograms, this organ is responsible for processing every gram of fructose you consume. Ultra-processed foods are saturated with fructose, often as high fructose corn syrup. When you consume more than a liver can handle, the organ converts the surplus directly into fat. This leads to fat droplets accumulating inside your liver cells, a condition known as non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD. It is the most common liver disorder globally, affecting 25% of the adult population. Research published in the Journal of Hepatology found that when participants replaced ultra-processed foods with whole food alternatives for just 4 weeks, they saw a measurable reduction in liver fat. The liver begins to clear fat and repair its own tissue as soon as you stop overwhelming its processing limits. By day 14, the restoration reaches your brain. The dopamine receptors that were dialed down after years of overstimulation finally begin to increase again. Because your reward system is no longer numb, everyday experiences feel more vivid. Food begins to taste better, not because of the seasoning, but because your brain is sensitive to normal levels of stimulation again. At the same time, your brain increases production of a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. Think of this as fertilizer for your neurons. It supports the growth of new cells and strengthens the connections used for learning and emotional regulation. While refined sugars suppress this protein, removing them allows BDNF levels to climb. By week 3, most people notice a distinct improvement in mental clarity and a lift in their overall mood. These shifts are not a placebo effect. They are the measurable result of the brain finally returning to the chemical environment it was designed for. This internal healing eventually shows up on your skin. The chronic, low-grade inflammation triggered by processed ingredients often manifests as acne, redness, and puffiness. As systemic inflammation drops over 3 to 4 weeks, your skin visibly calms and clears. Biologically, this is confirmed by a drop in CRP, a primary marker of inflammation in the body. Studies show these levels decrease significantly within 30 days of removing ultra-processed foods. These exterior changes are direct reflections of the inflammation within your organs actively subsiding. To see how these foods drive us to overeat, we have to look at a strict 2019 study from the National Institutes of Health. 20 adults lived in a metabolic ward where every calorie and meal was precisely tracked. For 2 weeks, they ate an ultra-processed diet, followed by 2 weeks on an unprocessed diet. Both were perfectly matched for calories, sugar, fat, and fiber, and participants could eat as much as they wanted. On the ultra-processed diet, participants consumed an average of 500 extra calories every day and gained roughly 1 kilogram in just 2 weeks. On the unprocessed diet, they lost 1 kilogram in the same period. The only variable was how the food was processed. Think about why you can eat an entire bag of chips without feeling full, while a plate of roasted vegetables and chicken leaves you satisfied halfway through. Ultra-processed foods are designed to bypass your biological satiety signals. They use neurological mechanisms to drive overeating, regardless of how many calories you've consumed. By day 30, you have reached a new biological baseline. Your gut microbiome has restructured. Your inflammatory markers have dropped. Your liver is shedding fat. Your dopamine system is responsive again. Your metabolism has moved away from a state of chronic overstimulation and back toward equilibrium. But this transition isn't a simple straight line. Quitting processed foods all at once carries real risks and exceptions that are rarely discussed. This brings us to a specific, mysterious biological structure that actively rebuilds itself every 10 to 14 days. This regenerating structure is the mechanism that determines why some people successfully complete this transition, while most others fail within the first month. Removing ultra-processed foods from your diet is one of the most impactful decisions you can make for your long-term health. However, this transition triggers immediate biological reactions that are often severe. Heavy consumers of these products face intense headaches, sharp mood swings, significant digestive disruption, and persistent fatigue. These are physical responses to the removal of engineered chemical compounds. This timeline maps the persistence of those withdrawal symptoms. While initial cravings are expected, the physical disruption often lasts well beyond 72 hours, with some symptoms persisting for 1 to 2 full weeks. For individuals with a history of disordered eating, sudden dietary shifts can trigger unhealthy psychological patterns. These cases require professional clinical oversight rather than independent action. Framing this transition as a simple test of willpower ignores these biological realities. Managing the removal of industrial food is a medical process that requires specific physiological care. In many areas, ultra-processed foods are an economic constraint rather than a personal choice. Aggressive pricing and limited access in food deserts often make these products the only viable option for lower-income households. It is also important to distinguish between types of processing. For example, pasteurized milk, canned tomatoes, and frozen vegetables are processed for safety and shelf life, and they remain healthy dietary staples. The concern lies with ultra-processed products. These are industrial formulations loaded with engineered additives and specific ratios of sugar, salt, and fat designed to override the body's natural satiety signals. Confusing basic preservation with ultra-processing creates a generalized food fear. This often prevents people from making practical, sustainable changes to their actual diet. One critical driver of dietary success resides on the biological surface of the tongue. This is where the physical hardware of taste is built. The human tongue contains roughly 10,000 individual taste buds, each acting as a distinct sensory node. Within each of those buds is a cluster of 50 to 100 individual receptor cells that detect and signal flavor to the brain. Years of exposure to concentrated salt and artificial sweeteners calibrate these cells to expect extreme chemical intensity. They adapt to a level of stimulation that whole foods cannot provide. During the first week of a dietary change, real food tastes bland because the tongue's hardware is still tuned to a hyper-intense, lab-engineered frequency. A fresh strawberry is being measured by sensors built for artificial flavorings. However, these sensory cells are part of a continuous replacement cycle. Your body regularly destroys old receptor cells to make room for new ones. This entire regeneration process takes between 10 and 14 days. Every 2 weeks, you have a fresh set of receptor cells. If you avoid ultra-processed foods during this window, the new cells are constructed in a different chemical environment. They grow without exposure to high-intensity artificial enhancers. These new cells are sensitive to subtler inputs. A strawberry that tasted dull during week 1 suddenly bursts with sweetness in week 2 as your sensors detect the complex flavors of whole food. Cravings for industrial food drop after 14 days because the literal sensory hardware driving those urges has been cycled out. The new cells were never calibrated to the old diet. This biological timeline reframes the difficulty of the transition. The discomfort of the first 10 days is not a permanent state of deprivation. It is the time required for your taste receptors to physically rebuild. A sustainable approach involves identifying 3 to 5 frequently consumed ultra-processed foods and replacing them sequentially. This allows both the gut and the tongue to transition across several regeneration cycles. You don't need total elimination to see results. Reducing ultra-processed intake from 70% of your calories to 50% is associated with meaningful improvements in inflammatory markers and metabolic health. When selecting foods, ignore front-of-package marketing like natural or organic. Instead, check the ingredient list for industrial substances that would not be found in a home kitchen. Focusing on adding whole foods rather than purely restricting junk protects the gut microbiome from sudden shock. Shifting the ratio gradually makes the biological recalibration sustainable. It takes time for the body to recover after years of adapting to an industrial diet. Patience is necessary as these biological systems reset. That recovery begins with the repair of the gut lining, which starts to restore its integrity once the cycle of ultra-processing is broken. This is followed by a restoration of dopamine receptor sensitivity in the brain and the gradual reduction of stored fat in the liver. On the surface of the tongue, your 10,000 sensors continue their 2-week cycle, constantly rebuilding themselves to match your current environment. While our modern food environment is dominated by engineered products, the body's microscopic architecture, from the gut lining to the taste receptor, is built to recover once those products are removed.